You have been taught to love others before yourself, to be kind, accommodating, nurturing, and selfless. You were told that goodness means giving, even when it empties you. And when you finally collapse under the weight of pleasing everyone but your own soul, they call it burnout. To feel whole as a woman, you must first return to the places where you abandoned yourself. Every yes you said when you meant no. Every silence you offered when your truth wanted to speak. Every time you chased love by making yourself smaller. These are not failures. They are footprints leading back to the moment you learned that love must be earned, but the soul does not trade in worthiness. It waits patiently for you to remember that you already belong. Wholeness begins the moment you stop seeking permission to exist, the moment you stop proving your value through service or perfection. It begins when you meet your own reflection, tired, flawed, radiant, and say, "I will not leave you again." For the woman who can love herself without condition does not need to be completed by another. She becomes the vessel through which love itself flows. Do not confuse self-love with indulgence. To love yourself is to stand in truth, to face the shadow that still whispers you are not enough, and to hold her until she no longer needs to fight. It is to forgive the girl who thought she had to compete, to heal the mother who never felt seen, to embrace the wild one who refused to be tamed. Each carries a piece of your soul. To love yourself is to gather them back into one circle. No man, no child, no religion can grant this to you. It is a sacred labor, the alchemy of remembering. You are not half of anything. You are the whole image of the feminine, fierce and tender, wise and wounded, lunar and luminous. When you finally love yourself, you stop begging for reflection in someone else's eyes. You walk as your own miracle, a woman no longer divided between who she gives to the world and who she is when she is alone. This is what it means to feel whole, to stand within yourself and know that love was never something to find. It was what you were made of all along. There is a kind of weariness I have seen in many women, not the fatigue of the body, but of the soul. It is the quiet exhaustion that comes from giving without receiving, from smiling when the heart wishes to rest. This weariness is not laziness, nor lack of virtue. It is the natural consequence of a life lived outwardly, when the inward life has been neglected too long. From early childhood, many women are taught to live for others. They learn that love is earned by service, that peace depends on pleasing. To be good is to bend, to forgive before being asked, to care before being cared for. And so they grow into adulthood carrying the silent law that to be loved, they must disappear a little. What begins as kindness becomes exile, exile from the living center of one's own being. The world often praises this self-forgetting. It calls her generous, gentle, devoted. But beneath the praise lies an unspoken tragedy. For what is devotion without self? What is goodness if it empties the soul? When a woman's life becomes a long obedience to expectation, her heart begins to fade from her own story. She lives surrounded by others, yet far from herself. I do not say this as blame, but as truth. The instinct to nurture is holy, yet when it becomes rule rather than rhythm, it enslaves. Every virtue, when exaggerated, becomes a vice. The woman who loves everyone but herself grows bitter without knowing why. She prays for strength, but what she needs is permission to exist without apology. To feel whole again, she must turn inward, toward the self she abandoned long ago. This self still waits unspoiled, unjudging, quietly alive, beneath the layers of duty. It is not a new identity to be built, but an old one to be remembered. The soul does not forget who it is. It simply waits for the mind to remember. Many fear that turning inward is selfish. They confuse self-love with vanity, but vanity is a mask worn to attract admiration. Self-love is the soil in which kindness grows. Only the woman who respects her own boundaries can truly honor another's. Only the one who listens to her inner voice can hear the cries of others without losing herself in their echo. The first step toward wholeness is often stillness. In stillness, she begins to hear the faint pulse of her true life, the thoughts she silenced, the desires she set aside, the dreams that whisper from the edges of sleep. These are not distractions, they are directions. They lead her back to her own center, where love is no longer obligation but essence. When she finally pauses and breathes, the emptiness she feared begins to fill with presence. The Fatigue she blamed on work or age reveals itself as the symptom of disconnection. And when she asks softly, "Who am I when no one needs me?" the answer rises like dawn from within, "I am." This is where wholeness begins, not in becoming someone new, but in remembering the one who has always been. Every ideal has a shadow. The brighter the ideal shines, the darker the shadow grows behind it. The image of the good woman is one of the brightest ideals the world has ever created. Gentle, patient, nurturing, self-sacrificing, she is praised in every culture, painted in story and scripture. But the image is too perfect, too polished, too narrow for real life. When a woman tries to live inside it, she cuts away parts of her soul to fit the frame. From girlhood, she learns the rules of goodness: smile when you wish to cry, agree when you wish to protest, stay quiet to keep the peace, help even when it hurts. These lessons form the mask of virtue, a face the world loves and rewards. But behind that face grows another one, unseen, unsmiling, waiting. That second face is the shadow. It holds the anger that was never allowed, the power that was suppressed, the voice that was silenced. The woman who lives only as good will one day meet this hidden self, often in the form of exhaustion, resentment, or sudden fury. She will say, "I don't know why I feel this way," and yet she knows. The part of her that was told to obey has grown hungry for life. The shadow does not come to destroy goodness, it comes to complete it. Without shadow, virtue becomes hollow, mechanical, a performance, not a truth. I once said that every light creates its own darkness. The woman who tries to be only light becomes unbalanced. She believes that anger, desire, ambition, or defiance make her unworthy, and so she represses them. But what is repressed does not disappear. It gathers strength in the unconscious and begins to rule her from within. Her anger slips out as bitterness. Her desire hides in envy. Her truth becomes illness or sadness. The shadow does not vanish by denial. It transforms by recognition. The good woman often fears her own depth. She is told that to question, to doubt, or to say no is to betray her nature. Yet these qualities, curiosity, discernment, self-definition, are the very traits that make her whole. To be truly good, she must become real, and reality includes both compassion and confrontation. There is a form of love that says yes, and another, just as sacred, that says no. When a woman first meets her shadow, she may feel shame, she sees anger and thinks it means cruelty. She feels desire and calls it sin, but anger, when understood, is not destruction. It is a signal of injustice. Desire, when integrated, is not lust. It is the longing for life. The shadow holds not only pain but power, the lost energy of the soul that was traded for approval. I have known many women who served others endlessly, yet carried silent rage. Their bodies spoke what their lips could not. Their dreams were filled with floods, storms, broken mirrors, images of energy breaking free. The unconscious, ignored too long, rebels. It demands recognition. Illness, conflict, or sudden rebellion often mark this moment of uprising. What looks like crisis is actually invitation, the beginning of individuation, the soul's insistence on being whole. The woman who accepts this call begins to withdraw her projections. She stops blaming others for her discontent and turns inward to ask, "What have I denied in myself?" She discovers that beneath the mask of virtue lies a person both wilder and wiser than she imagined, one capable of anger that protects life, passion that gives birth to creation, ambition that builds meaning. She sees that the good woman was only half of her story. This awakening can feel dangerous. The world may not understand it. Those who benefited from her selflessness may call her selfish when she begins to set boundaries. But what they call selfishness is simply self-respect returning. What they call rebellion is honesty. When she stops performing goodness, she begins to live it. There is an ancient myth that tells of a goddess who descends into the underworld to reclaim her power. She must shed her ornaments, her crown, her jewels, her robes, until she stands naked before her dark sister. That sister is the shadow. Only by bowing to her does the goddess return whole. So it is with every woman. She must meet her inner opposite, not to defeat it, but to embrace it. I have often said that no tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. This means that a woman's goodness, to be true, must include her depths. Her gentleness must be grounded in strength. Her compassion must be balanced by clarity. When she accepts her darkness, she becomes trustworthy, for she no longer hides behind false virtue. She knows she can be fierce without losing love, and she can be soft without losing dignity. The integration of the shadow does not make her less feminine, it makes her fully human. She learns that kindness without honesty is weakness, and honesty without kindness is cruelty. To live both is wisdom. The good woman transforms into the whole woman, not saint, not sinner, but a living paradox, nurturing yet strong, peaceful yet powerful, humble yet unafraid to shine. Her presence changes everything around her. She no longer serves to be seen. She serves because her nature is abundant. She no longer fears being misunderstood, for she no longer misunderstands herself. The peace she once tried to maintain by pleasing others now radiates from within because it is built on truth. When a woman accepts her shadow, she becomes the guardian of her own soul. She does not need to suppress her feelings. She listens to them. She does not seek constant approval. She trusts her own knowing. Her face's goodness deepens no longer a mask, but a melody. Those around her sense the difference. Her smile no longer hides pain, it reveals strength. Her love no longer exhausts, it restores. To live as a whole woman is to carry both light and darkness without shame. It is to say, yes, I can love you and still disagree. I can care for you and still care for myself. I can forgive and still remember. This is not defiance of the feminine, it is its redemption. And when the good woman dies, the true woman is born. She does not need the world's applause. Her peace comes from knowing she belongs to herself. In her, the shadow and the light are no longer enemies. They have become sisters, holding hands beneath the same heart. This is the beginning of freedom, when a woman no longer chooses between goodness and truth because she has learned they are one. Every woman carries within her a secret ache, a quiet doubt about her own worth. It may not speak aloud, but it whispers beneath every choice, every silence, every apology. It says, I will be loved when I am good enough. I will rest when I have earned it. I will be seen when I am perfect. This wound of worth is not born in her alone, it is inherited. It passes from mother to daughter, from story to story, through generations that learned love as reward, not birthright. Long before she could reason, she began to read the faces of others to know who she was. When they smiled, she felt worthy. When they frowned, she felt lost. Approval became her compass, affection her air. Each act of kindness was a bid for belonging, each disappointment a sign that she had failed again. By the time she grew into womanhood, her worth no longer lived inside her. It dangled from the opinions of others like a lantern in someone else's hand. I have often said that the human soul cannot thrive when its value depends upon the outer world. The psyche is a living organism. It withers under conditions of conditional love. When a woman measures her worth by how much she gives, how well she pleases, or how gracefully she endures, she builds her identity upon sand. The first storm of rejection washes it away. And yet, she rebuilds the same fragile house again and again because she has forgotten that she is the builder, not the walls. This wound shows itself in subtle ways. She apologizes when she has done nothing wrong. She minimizes her pain so that others are not uncomfortable. She praises others but cannot accept praise herself. When she succeeds, she feels guilt instead of joy. When she rests, she feels fear instead of peace. She calls herself lazy for needing quiet, selfish for wanting solitude. Every time she ignores her own needs, the wound deepens and the soul withdraws a little further. Many women come to me in dreams. They stand before mirrors that reflect nothing. They search through empty houses, calling for someone who never answers. These are images of the forgotten self, the part of the psyche that holds the memory of innate worth. The mirror is blank because she has stopped seeing her own face. The house is empty because she has moved out of her own inner home. This wound of worth is not personal, it is collective. It is the result of centuries in which the feminine was valued only through her relation to others, daughter, wife, mother, helper. Rarely was she allowed to exist as her own being, complete and sufficient. Even the gods of old reflected this imbalance. The divine feminine was worshipped for her fertility, her beauty, her mercy, all qualities that serve, but her wisdom, her power, her sovereignty were feared and forgotten. The woman who absorbs this legacy grows into adulthood already divided against herself. She learns to hide her hunger for recognition, calling it humility. She masks her ambition, calling it modesty. She softens her truth so that it will be palatable. In time, she forgets the sound of her own voice. Yet, the soul cannot live in pretense forever. It begins to send signals, dreams of confinement, restlessness in success, tears that rise without reason. These are not weaknesses, they are messages. The unconscious is calling her back to her own worth. To heal this wound, she must remember a truth older than history, that being is enough. Worth does not grow by approval, it shines by nature. The sun does not earn its right to rise, it rises because it is sun. The woman who remembers this begins to walk differently. Her kindness no longer drains her because it flows from fullness, not fear. Her love becomes clear and strong, for she gives it freely, not as payment. But such remembrance does not come easily. The old patterns resist. The voice of doubt still whispers, "You are selfish, you are too much, you are not enough." This voice is ancient. It carries the echoes of mothers and grandmothers who were taught to survive by shrinking. To silence it, she must first listen. She must let the voice speak until it exhausts itself, and then answer calmly, "I am allowed to be." The path of healing often begins with anger, not the anger of destruction, but of awakening. She grows tired of pleasing, tired of apologizing, tired of earning. She begins to say no where once she said yes. Those around her may resist. They may accuse her of change, of selfishness, of coldness. But this is not coldness. It is the first warmth she has allowed herself. Each no becomes a small return of her own power. Still, the ego trembles. It fears rejection. It asks, "If I stop serving, will I still be loved?" And the answer comes, slowly but surely, yes, but differently. The love that remains after she stops performing is the love that is real. It may be fewer voices, but it will be truer ones. And above all, she will begin to feel love within herself, not pride, but peace. True worth is quiet. It does not shout. It simply knows. It is the feeling of being rooted in one's own life, of knowing that existence itself is permission. The woman who remembers this no longer bargains for belonging. She does not ask, "Do you need me?" but "Do I honor myself by being here?" Her life becomes a dialogue with truth, not demand. This healing is slow. The patterns of centuries cannot be undone in a season. There will be days when she slips back into old habits, offering herself too quickly, giving without pause. But each time she remembers, each time she stops, breathes, and chooses from love rather than fear, the wound closes a little more. The scar that remains will not be weakness, but wisdom. And something else begins to happen. As she remembers her worth, she begins to see the worth of others more clearly. She no longer gives from superiority or pity, but from equality. Her compassion becomes cleaner, her service freer. She does not rescue because she no longer believes others are powerless. She does not compete because she no longer doubts her own light. Her presence becomes healing simply because it carries no need to prove. The woman who heals her worth changes the world around her without trying. The children she raises will learn love as truth, not transaction. The friends who come near her will feel permission to rest. Even the men who meet her will begin to sense something unfamiliar, a woman who needs nothing, yet offers everything. Her worth shines without announcement, and its radiance awakens others to their own. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the return to the natural order of the soul, where love flows in both directions and being itself is sacred. In such a woman, the centuries of silence begin to end. The forgotten feminine rises, not to rule, but to remind the world of balance, that giving and receiving, serving and being, loving and resting are not opposites, but one movement of the same heart. The wound of worth was never a flaw. It was an initiation. Through it, the woman learns to distinguish false love from true, duty from devotion, obedience from integrity. The pain she carried was the soul's way of urging her toward herself. When she finally answers that call, she discovers that worth was never lost, only misplaced. It waited quietly in the depths of her being, untouched by praise or blame. When she finds it again, her eyes change. She no longer looks outward for reflection. She becomes her own mirror, clear, steady, and kind. She may still serve, still love, still give, but now her giving nourishes instead of drains, for she no longer pours from emptiness, she overflows from wholeness. And that is the essence of healing, to stop earning what you already are, to rest in your own being as enough, to know that life itself wanted you here, not for what you do, but for who you are. This is how a woman begins to feel whole, not by becoming more, but by realizing she was never less. There is a silence that is not peace, but suppression. It lives in the throats of countless women, the silence of truth swallowed too many times, of words weighed and withheld for fear of consequence. I have met this silence in dreams, a woman trying to speak, but no sound comes. Her mouth opens, yet the air turns to glass. This is not merely metaphor, it is the image of a soul that has forgotten how to speak its own name. From childhood, a woman learns that her voice can be dangerous. When she cried too loudly, she was told to hush. When she spoke her mind, she was called defiant. When she expressed desire, she was shamed. And so, little by little, she learned that safety lay in silence. She built her gentleness like armor. She smiled to soften truth, laughed to hide discomfort, apologized for existing too fully. The cost of this training is invisible but immense, for when the voice is suppressed, the soul cannot breathe. The human voice is more than sound, it is the bridge between inner and outer worlds. When a woman cannot express her inner truth, she becomes divided, one self that feels, another that performs. The disconnection grows slowly, like fog rising on a lake, until she can no longer see where her real self begins. In this haze, she forgets her own authority. She begins to doubt her feelings, mistrust her intuition, dismiss her insight as foolish or excessive. Her body, however, remembers. The voice, though silenced outwardly, begins to speak through other means. Tightness in the chest, heaviness in the stomach, fatigue that no sleep can cure. The unsaid finds its way into the flesh. The unspoken becomes illness, the unacknowledged becomes anxiety. The body cries the words the lips could not bear to form. Every ache, every knot, every tear withheld is the soul's attempt to be heard again. I have said that repression is not forgetting, but burial, and whatever is buried alive will one day rise. When a woman's voice has been silenced too long, it will return with force. Sometimes it bursts forth as rage. Sometimes it comes as tears she cannot explain. Sometimes it appears in dreams as fire, wind, or flood. These are not signs of madness, but of awakening. The psyche is reclaiming its right to expression. To recover her voice, a woman must first listen, not outwardly, but inwardly. She must dare to hear the small, honest sound that trembles beneath her fear. It may not come as speech at first. It may come as a feeling, a memory, an image, or a sudden certainty. The soul rarely shouts. It whispers, yet when she begins to listen, the whisper grows clearer. She starts to remember what she believes, what she loves, what she cannot tolerate any longer. The rediscovery of voice often begins in solitude. Alone, she can speak without correction, feel without judgment, think without interruption. Solitude is not emptiness. It is echo, the sound of the self returning. When she sits in silence and hears her own thoughts without censor, she begins to trust them again. This trust is the first root of her new strength. The next step is courage, the courage to let her inner voice become outer sound, to say what she has hidden, to tell her story as it truly is. It may come out shaky, uncertain, too soft or too loud, but it will be real. And reality, even spoken imperfectly, is far more powerful than silence perfected. When she speaks her truth for the first time, the world often trembles. Those accustomed to her compliance may resist. They will call her difficult, dramatic, ungrateful. But the truth is never welcomed by those who benefit from lies. She must not turn back. For every word she speaks honestly, even if misunderstood, strengthens the bridge between her inner and outer life. Her voice is not a weapon, though for a time it may feel like one. At first, she may speak with anger. That is natural. Anger is the sound of a boundary rebuilding itself. It is the soul reclaiming its edges. But in time, her voice softens again, not from fear, but from maturity. It learns to shape truth without harm, to carry conviction without cruelty. Then, the voice becomes what it was always meant to be, a melody of being, both tender and strong. A woman's voice carries more than words. It carries centuries of silence. When she speaks not only for herself, but for all who could not. Her courage becomes collective medicine. Each sentence she dares to say frees a little more of the feminine spirit buried in the unconscious of humanity. Her truth ripples outward, healing what history has hidden. Many women fear that reclaiming their voice will make them lonely. For a while it might. Silence often buys belonging, and truth sometimes costs it. But in time, the right companions will gather those who love the sound of her authenticity, not the echo of her compliance. Her voice will call them like a bell across distance, and they will answer. For the soul always attracts what resonates with its own tone. When a woman reclaims her voice, she reclaims her choice. She no longer lives by default, reacting to what others expect. She begins to shape her own reality. Her words become creative acts, shaping her days, her relationships, her destiny. This is the forgotten power of the voice. It does not merely describe the world, it creates it. Every yes and no, every confession and silence builds the architecture of her life. The woman who has found her voice walks differently. There is a steadiness to her presence, a quiet authority that needs no defense. She no longer rushes to please or prove. Her speech becomes measured, but never timid. She says little, but each word carries weight. The energy that once leaked through self-doubt now radiates as calm certainty. Those who listen to her feel not dominance, but truth, and truth, when spoken from the soul, commands reverence without demand. Her relationships begin to change. The people who once spoke over her begin to pause. The ones who truly see her draw nearer. Some will leave, unable to face the mirror her authenticity holds. But she no longer clings, for she knows that loss born of truth is a kind of gain. Every connection that survives her voice becomes more genuine, because it now includes her whole self, not just the parts that pleased others. Her creativity, too, is reborn. The voice that speaks truth also paints, writes, sings, heals. When repression ends, expression begins. The energy once spent maintaining silence flows into art, intuition, laughter. The woman who once felt muted begins to shape beauty out of her own being. Her work carries a different light, not performance, but presence. And yet, she does not despise her silence, she honors it. For without silence, she would never have learned to listen. She understands now that both speech and stillness have their seasons. The wise woman knows when to speak and when to remain quiet, when to offer truth and when to protect it. Her silence is no longer submission, it is sovereignty. There is an old saying, when a woman speaks, the earth listens. It means that her voice is not mere sound, but resonance, a vibration that aligns with the rhythm of life itself. When her words come from the depth of being, they carry healing. They remind the world of balance, of compassion, of the sacredness of truth. The rediscovery of her voice is the rediscovery of her soul's authority. It is the moment she ceases to be a reflection and becomes a light. She no longer waits for others to define her. She defines the world by her presence. And in doing so, she restores something ancient, the sound of the feminine consciousness rising once again to its rightful place beside the masculine, not beneath it, not above it, but in harmony. This is what it means for a woman to speak, not to argue for her right to exist, but to express the wisdom of existence itself. When she says, "This is my truth," she is not only naming herself, she is naming the divine within her. Her voice becomes prayer and prophecy, song and strength. When the lost voice returns, she realizes it was never truly lost, only waiting behind the door of fear. And when that door finally opens, she finds not a stranger, but an old friend, her own soul, smiling, saying, "You have found me at last." There comes a time in every woman's life when the outer world can no longer satisfy her. No amount of giving, achieving, or pleasing fills the emptiness that grows inside. She begins to feel that something is missing, though she cannot say what. The life she built, her routines, her relationships, her successes, all feel strangely hollow. This emptiness is not failure, it is invitation. It is the first whisper of the soul calling her inward. Most people fear this feeling and flee from it. They drown it in work, in distraction, in caretaking. They mistake it for depression or boredom, when in truth it is descent, the soul's natural movement toward depth. For the psyche, like nature, moves in seasons. There is a time for light and activity, and a time for darkness and stillness. When the outer life has grown too loud, the unconscious begins to rise. The woman feels tired because she is being pulled into her own depths. The descent is an ancient journey. In myth, it is told through goddesses who leave the world of light to descend into the underworld, Inanna, Persephone, Isis, and countless others. Each must shed her jewels and garments as she goes down, stripped of every role and title, until only the naked soul remains. So too must the modern woman. The mother, the daughter, the lover, the helper, all identities fall away. What is left is essence. At first, this descent feels like loss. Her old ambitions no longer stir her. The friendships that once felt nourishing feel distant. Even faith may falter. The surface of her life seems to crumble. She feels disoriented, like a traveler who has lost the path. But this confusion is sacred. It is not the end of her journey. It is the descent into the true beginning. For one cannot reach the roots of the soul without passing through the soil of darkness. The unconscious does not speak in logic or argument. It speaks in images, dreams, and moods. When a woman descends, her night world begins to awaken. Her dreams grow vivid. She may see forests, rivers, caves, or strange figures who speak in riddles. These are the voices of her forgotten self. The rational mind may dismiss them as nonsense, but the soul knows better. The dream world is the ancient language of the psyche, symbolic, mysterious, alive. To listen to it is to begin remembering who she truly is. The descent also stirs emotion, grief, anger, loneliness, fear. These feelings, though painful, are not enemies. They are messengers. Grief brings her to what she has lost. Anger shows her where her boundaries were broken. Loneliness reveals the parts of her soul that were left behind. Each feeling, when welcomed rather than resisted, leads her deeper into authenticity. The heart heals not by avoidance, but by awareness. In the depths, she meets the parts of herself she once banished. The wild one who refused to be tamed, the sensual one who was shamed, the ambitious one who was silenced, the intuitive one who was dismissed. These are her lost sisters, fragments of her own psyche, exiled to survive. They greet her now, asking not for perfection, but for inclusion. Wholeness begins when she gathers these parts back into her embrace. This gathering is not easy. Each lost aspect carries both pain and power. The wild one may rage, the sensual one may weep, the ambitious one may accuse. She must meet them all with compassion, not judgment, for they are not demons, they are guardians of her unlived life. Every part that was rejected now returns with a gift, creativity, vitality, wisdom. The task is not to conquer them, but to listen. In this underworld, she learns patience. Nothing can be rushed here. The soul's rhythm is slower than the mind's. Days of stillness may pass without clarity. She will want to climb back up, to find answers, to fix herself. But descent is not about fixing, it is about feeling. The darkness does not demand action, it demands presence. When she can sit in her uncertainty without fleeing, transformation begins. The descent also brings confrontation with the shadow, the darker aspects of the psyche that hold shame, envy, or destructive impulse. She must face them honestly. To see one's own shadow without turning away is the beginning of wisdom. For what is unconscious rules us. What is seen becomes integrated. The woman who dares to meet her darkness learns humility, and in humility she finds grace. During this time, solitude is both her burden and her medicine. The world may not understand her withdrawal. Friends may say she has changed, and indeed, she has. The descent separates her from the collective noise so that she may hear the individual song of her soul. Alone, she begins to discover her own rhythm, her own prayers. She learns that solitude is not isolation, but communion with what is eternal within. In dreams, she may encounter symbols of transformation: snakes shedding skin, water turning to light, wings sprouting from broken stone. Each image is a promise what dies will be reborn. The descent is not punishment, it is preparation. The old self must dissolve for the new to emerge. Just as the seed must split before the flower can bloom, the soul must crack open before wholeness can be felt. There comes a moment, deep in this descent, when she realizes she is not lost. What she thought was darkness is actually depth. The silence is not absence, but presence, the voice of something vast and kind watching her from within. She understands then that the descent is not downward, but inward, and that what she has been searching for outside was waiting all along in her own depths. In this discovery, her relationship with pain changes. She no longer asks it to leave, she asks it to teach. She stops running from sorrow and begins to hold it, as a mother holds a crying child. The pain softens, it reveals the love hidden beneath it. She learns that suffering, when entered consciously, becomes compassion. The woman who has descended does not pity others, she understands them. Slowly, light begins to return, not the blinding light of before, but a soft inner radiance. It comes not from escape, but from acceptance. She begins to sense direction again, but now it rises from the inside. Her desires return, but they are different, quieter, clearer, free of performance. What she seeks now is not applause or approval, but meaning. She has touched the center of her being, and it has changed her forever. The woman who has descended and returned carries a depth that cannot be faked. Her eyes hold both sorrow and serenity. She moves more slowly, speaks more truthfully, loves more consciously. She no longer fears the dark because she knows it as her teacher. She has met the soul of womanhood, not the fragile saint or the obedient helper, but the ancient feminine who knows life and death, loss and renewal, shadow and light. Through her descent, she has recovered what the world forgot, that strength is born in surrender, that wisdom grows in silence, that the path down is the same path up. Every true awakening begins in the underworld. The woman who has gone there and returned no longer seeks herself in the eyes of others. She carries her own reflection within, luminous and whole. The descent is the most feared and the most necessary journey of the feminine soul. It is the place where the woman who once lived for others finally meets the woman who lives from within. And when she rises again, she brings with her not the perfection of the ideal, but the power of the real. Her wholeness does not glitter, it glows, for she has seen what lies beneath the roots of her own divinity, and in that knowing, she becomes unshakable. Every journey of healing leads at last to a meeting not with another, but with oneself. The woman who has descended and faced her shadows discovers that wholeness is not a gift the world can give. It is a marriage within her own soul, for inside every woman lives two eternal forces, one that feels and one that acts, one that dreams and one that decides, one that receives and one that builds. I have called them the feminine and the masculine, not as man and woman, but as symbols of the energies that shape life itself. In most lives, these two are strangers. The feminine, within her intuitive, creative feeling, has been taught to doubt itself. The masculine, within her focused, assertive, clear, has been either overdeveloped in self-defense or suppressed in fear of seeming harsh. When one tap dominates, imbalance follows. Too much inner masculine, and she becomes driven, restless, always producing yet never fulfilled. Too much inner feminine, and she drifts, sensing meaning but unable to manifest it. Wholeness arises only when the two recognize one another as equals. This meeting does not happen through will, but through awareness. The woman begins to notice these voices inside her. One whispers, rest, listen, wait. The other says, move, act, decide. For years she obeyed one and ignored the other. Now she learns to let them speak to each other. The result is not argument, but dialogue. She discovers that wisdom lives in the rhythm between them, action guided by feeling, intuition grounded by clarity. The masculine in her is not an oppressor, it is a protector. When unconscious, it becomes rigid, critical, controlling. When conscious, it builds structure for the soul to live in. It says, I will create safety so that you may create beauty. Likewise, the feminine in her is not weak. When denied, it becomes manipulation or chaos. When honored, it brings compassion, vision, and grace. The two were never meant to rule or serve one another. They are meant to dance, each giving shape to the other's essence. This inner union is what ancient alchemists called the conjunctio, the sacred marriage of opposites. They described it not as romance, but as the birth of gold from base metal. When the conscious and unconscious, the active and receptive, the light and dark unite, a third thing is born, the self, the unbreakable wholeness of being. The woman who achieves this inner union becomes radiant not because she is flawless, but because she is integrated. She no longer lives in fragments, torn between extremes. The path to this union is not simple. It requires her to face the patterns that kept these forces apart. Many women have learned to mistrust their inner masculine because they experienced outer masculine energy as domination, a father who silenced, a lover who controlled, a world that rewarded obedience over voice. In response, the feminine within withdrew, retreating into dream or despair. To heal, she must now differentiate. The true masculine does not suppress the feminine, it serves her. The true masculine gives form to her vision, direction to her intuition, protection to her softness. She must also reclaim her own inner masculine from the distortions of the world. This means learning discipline without rigidity, confidence without arrogance, action without violence. She must let the masculine within her become the sword that cuts through illusion, not the cage that confines life. When this happens, she no longer fears authority, her own or another's. She carries it with quiet assurance. The same healing occurs with her inner feminine. The woman, to survive, often turned against this part of herself. She learned to suppress her tears, her instincts, her intuition. She learned to value logic above empathy, proof above feeling. But this repression cost her vitality. To restore wholeness, she must again honor her inner feminine, the moonlit current of sensitivity that feels before it thinks. She must allow herself to soften without collapsing, to feel without being consumed. The union of these two energies is like the union of river and bank. Without the bank, the river would flood and lose direction. Without the river, the bank would remain dry and lifeless. Together, they form the landscape of a meaningful life. When the masculine and feminine within a woman work together, she flows with purpose. Her emotions have direction, her actions have soul. At first, this balance feels fragile. Old habits return. She overworks, then collapses. She nurtures others, then feels unseen. But now she recognizes the pattern and pauses. She listens to both voices, one urging rest, the other calling for resolve. She no longer sees them as opposites, but as two breaths of the same being. Slowly, harmony grows. She begins to move through life as if accompanied by a steady inner rhythm. Inhale and exhale, give and receive, speak and listen, act and reflect. In this state, her relationships change. She no longer seeks in men the strength she has reclaimed within. She no longer projects her inner masculine onto others, demanding rescue or direction. Nor does she deny connection, for her inner feminine has made her receptive again. Love, for her, becomes no longer a transaction, but a meeting of equals. The man before her is not savior nor competitor, but mirror. Their union becomes not dependence, but exchange, a dance between two complete souls. She finds that creativity, too, deepens. When the masculine and feminine unite, imagination takes form. Dreams become reality. The ideas that once floated like clouds now root themselves in the earth. Her art, her work, her very way of living become expressions of balance. She does not rush to prove. She allows what is real to grow. Her life gains rhythm, beauty, and weight. This union also transforms her relationship with power. She no longer fears it. She understands that true power is not domination, but presence, the quiet strength of being aligned. Her inner masculine gives her the courage to speak. Her inner feminine ensures her words are filled with compassion. She becomes both sword and chalice, clear and kind, decisive and gentle. The world feels her equilibrium before she even speaks. In this integration, the ancient wounds between man and woman begin to heal within her. She no longer views the masculine as threat or the feminine as weakness. She sees them as sacred counterparts. The outer world reflects this shift. Men around her begin to soften, sensing in her not challenge but invitation, an invitation to their own wholeness. She, in turn, begins to feel reverence for them, for she recognizes that what once divided them was misunderstanding, not nature. The inner marriage also restores her sense of purpose. She no longer lives in reaction to life, she lives in rhythm with it. Her intuition guides her direction, and her reason gives it shape. Her feelings become wisdom, her will becomes devotion. This is what it means to live as an integrated being, to move as one whose actions are guided by spirit and grounded in form. Sometimes she will lose this balance, for no harmony is permanent. There will be days when she forgets her inner strength, when she doubts her softness, when she leans too far into one side, but now she knows the way back. The two within her are no longer adversaries, they are lovers. They wait patiently for her return. When she sits in stillness, they rejoin like two wings, remembering how to move together. This is the fulfillment of the feminine path, to unite not with a man, but with one's own soul. The woman who achieves this is free, not because she is alone, but because she belongs wholly to herself. Her choices come from clarity, not compulsion. Her love flows from abundance, not lack. Her strength no longer hides her tenderness no longer denies her strength. The ancients said that when the sun marries the moon, the world is renewed. So it is with the woman who marries her inner opposites. She becomes a vessel of renewal for everything around her. Her presence brings order to chaos, peace to tension, and meaning to confusion. Wherever she stands, others feel the equilibrium she carries. She no longer speaks of balance, she embodies it. This union within is not the end of her journey, but its flowering. For what was once divided has become one, and from that oneness, she rises steady, luminous, whole, carrying within her the eternal harmony of creation itself. When the woman returns from her inner journey, she does not look the same. The light in her eyes has changed, not brighter, but steadier, as though she carries a flame that no wind can extinguish. She moves more slowly now, not from weariness, but from presence. Her steps are deliberate, her silence is full. Those who meet her sense that something in her cannot be possessed or persuaded. She has become sovereign not through defiance, but through remembrance. She has remembered who she is. The world often expects her to return as she was before, gentle, compliant, eager to serve, but she has crossed too deep a river to go back. The woman who once lived by approval now lives by alignment. Her worth no longer depends on what others receive from her, but on what truth speaks through her. This truth does not shout. It radiates quietly from her being. Even in her stillness, one feels the power of a life that belongs entirely to itself. She no longer seeks reflection in the eyes of others. Once, she looked outward for proof that she mattered. Now, she looks inward and finds the universe mirrored there. The love she used to chase now flows through her naturally, like breath. She gives without depletion, speaks without fear, and loves without losing herself. To love, for her, is not to merge, but to meet two flames sharing the same air, each lighting the other without dimming its own glow. Her relationships begin to transform. Those built on dependency or control fall away, for she no longer feeds them. The ones that remain deepen into authenticity. She can be alone without feeling abandoned, and with others without losing herself. Her love no longer demands reassurance. It offers recognition. She sees others not as saviors or threats, but as fellow travelers on the same path toward wholeness. In her presence, others feel safe to be real. Her calm disarms pretense. She listens differently now, not to reply, but to witness. Her eyes say, "I have been where you are not alone." Her empathy no longer drains her, because it flows from the well of her own healed heart. Compassion has replaced pity. Strength has replaced sacrifice. she can hold another's sorrow without drowning in it. The whole woman no longer divides herself between roles. She is mother, lover, artist, seeker, healer, all at once, and none exclusively. Her identity is fluid, not fragmented. She no longer wears masks to fit situations. She brings the same self to all. Her tenderness is not weakness, nor her power aggression. These qualities, once split, now move as one current. She has learned that the highest expression of love is truth, and the highest form of truth is love. She lives from the center, that quiet place where intuition and reason, passion and peace coexist. From this center, she moves through the world without haste. She no longer reacts, she responds. Her energy is measured, her attention precise. She has learned to say yes without fear and no without guilt. She no longer performs goodness, she embodies grace. In her said work, she no longer strives to prove worth. Her creations arise naturally, as blossoms from a rooted tree. Whether she paints, teaches, mothers, or prays, her actions feel inevitable, not forced, but flowing. There is no separation between what she does and who she is. Her life itself has become art, shaped by the rhythm of her own authenticity. The whole woman also carries a quiet rebellion, though she no longer fights. She simply lives differently. She will not exhaust herself to meet expectations. She will not trade truth for harmony. She will not silence her instincts to preserve false peace. Her mere existence challenges everything that once defined goodness as self-denial, yet she does not argue. She knows that consciousness spreads, not by demand, but by demonstration. Her presence becomes instruction. Other women, seeing her, begin to question the patterns they have inherited. They sense something ancient awakening in themselves, the desire to live from essence, not effort. The whole woman does not preach to them, she reminds them. Her life whispers, "You too are allowed to be whole." And through her, the collective feminine begins to remember its original dignity. This is how transformation spreads, not through movements alone, but through individual souls who become living symbols of balance. The whole woman embodies what culture has long forgotten, that the feminine is not submission, nor sentimentality, but deep intelligence, the intelligence of the earth, the seasons, the heart. She moves through cycles of creation and rest without guilt. She trusts timing more than control. Her strength is not in resistance, but in rootedness. When others panic, she remains grounded, for she knows that storms are teachers. She has descended before and learned that the soil of darkness always births new life. Thus, she meets change without fear, loss without despair. She no longer prays for ease, but for understanding. She welcomes challenge as the sculptor of her character. Her wholeness is visible not in perfection but in peace. She still feels sorrow, anger, longing, but she no longer resists them. Emotions come and go like tides, and she lets them pass through without shame. She no longer divides feelings into good and bad. She knows that all are necessary, that the heart is an ocean large enough to hold them all. This serenity does not make her passive. On the contrary, it gives her immense vitality. Because her energy is no longer lost to inner conflict, she moves with precision. Her words, actions, and silences align. This integrity gives her power, not the power of dominance, but of resonance. When she speaks, truth follows. When she acts, things align. Her presence influences without force. In her spiritual life, she no longer seeks the divine outside herself. She knows now that the sacred is not hidden in distant heavens, but in her own breath, her own body, her own being. Prayer, for her, is not a plea, but a participation, a merging of self with life. Every act of attention becomes devotion, sweeping the floor, holding a child, watching the sun descend. She has discovered what all mystics discover, that God was never far, only unseen beneath layers of fear and striving. In her wholeness, the woman becomes bridge. She unites the opposites within the collective, just as she did within herself. Where others see division, she sees dialogue. Where others seek victory, she seeks understanding. Her very existence reminds the world that gentleness and power, silence and speech, independence and love can coexist. She carries reconciliation wherever she goes, and yet she remains humble. The wholeness she has found does not make her superior, it makes her simple. She knows that all souls walk the same spiral path, only at different points along the circle. When she meets those still trapped in illusion, she does not judge. She remembers how it felt to be lost and offers empathy instead of instruction. Her wisdom has become quiet and her kindness vast. The whole woman no longer belongs to one story. She belongs to life itself. She can live in solitude without feeling incomplete, in companionship without losing independence. She is equally at home in joy and in sorrow, in movement and in stillness. Her identity is not a role, but a rhythm, one that flows through everything she touches. From her, others learn that wholeness is not the absence of fracture, but the inclusion of it. The healed woman still bears scars, but they have become sacred marks, reminders of where light entered. She does not hide them, she honors them, for they tell the truth of her becoming. As she walks through the world, she becomes teacher not through doctrine, but by being. Her laughter feels like prayer, her silence feels like rest. People feel more themselves around her, for her wholeness invites theirs. She does not need to fix or persuade, she simply embodies what she has learned, that peace is not something to be found, but something to be remembered. The circle of her life has closed, yet it is also open. The girl who once sought approval has become the woman who seeks meaning. The voice that was once silenced now sings softly in everything she does. The love she once gave away freely now rises from within, inexhaustible. She has returned not to what she was, but to what she has always been beneath the noise, whole, holy, and human. When I speak of her return, I do not mean she ascends to some unreachable ideal. She returns to the earth, to ordinary life, to the kitchen, the market, the laughter, the tears. But she lives differently now. She is in the world, but not bound by it. Her freedom is invisible, but felt. She no longer chases meaning, she radiates it. This is the prophecy of the whole woman, that when even one remembers her wholeness, she changes the world around her. For every woman who stands in her truth strengthens the ground beneath all others. Her wholeness becomes contagion, quiet, radiant, unstoppable. And so she walks not above others, not behind them, but among them, her every step a blessing, her every breath a testament to the soul's endurance. She is the embodiment of the forgotten feminine, now awakened, now alive. She has returned from exile. She has met her shadow and her light. She has united the opposites within her and carries the wisdom of both. She is not seeking anymore, she is. This is what it means to finally feel whole as a woman, to walk through the world as both ocean and shore, both wound and healing, both silence and song. To live as one who no longer searches for belonging because she is belonging, the meeting place of body and spirit, heaven and earth, love and life itself.